What's up, guys? This is Vaughn Stoffey from Defeated Sanity, and you are listening to the Nothing Shocking podcast.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Isn't it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy. We're not worthy.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dogwell Studio is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on X at No Shock Pod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We'd like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is
Vaughn Stoffey, guitarist for Defeated Sanity.
Yeah, promoting the band's 7th studio album, Chronicles of Lunacy. It's going to be available on November 22nd.
All right, and for European fans, I think they got a tour coming up.
Absolutely, so let's get to it.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.
Vaughn, welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'd like to introduce you, my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Vaughn, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, very happy to be here, guys. Thanks for putting in the effort, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Defeated Sanity are releasing their 7th studio album, Chronicles of Lunacy, on November 22nd. Can you give our listeners an insight to the band's latest creative endeavor?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the listeners that might not be as familiar with the band and what we do, you know, Lille and his father, Wolfgang, rest in peace, rest in power, started the band back in '93 when Lille was still a teenager, and basically it was started out as an homage to really like classic early '90s death metal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then as time progressed, the band moved into more of the contemporary brutal death metal sound that really was inspired by, you know, the Unique Leader movement in California with like bands like Disgorge and Deeds of Flesh and, you know, a bunch of other brutal death metal bands that we all love, Malignancy from New York, you know, all these bands. So the band really came up and I think made their name on the brutality aspect, right? Like that's kind of what the band was synonymous with. And then Lille, over maybe the past decade or so, started to kind of defect from that and move more into progressive sounds that you hear on the Dharmata EP and you heard on the last 6th studio album that Defeated Sanity did, which is the Sanguinary Impetus. Now, the intention collectively behind Chronicles of Lunacy was to return to the brutality kind of being at the center of the prerogative for the album. You know, the spirit of the album, the velocity of the album. However, so many musical ideas were developed and cultivated in that period of time when Defeated kind of defected more into technical and progressive priorities in the music. So, you know, the goal was, okay, how do you mix all of these musical devices back into the spirit of the music being brutal centric? And I think that as far as just an opening statement, if you will, for people that might not be familiar with the band, or those who are familiar but are looking into what we're about to drop in the end of the month. That's at the core, I think, of it.
Oh, very good. Well, when it comes to songwriting, new Defeated Sanity music, is the formula of the songwriting similar from album to album, or does the band take a new approach to songwriting when it comes to creating new music from, I guess, over the discourse of the band's body of work?
Sure. Well, so Lille is the principal composer, certainly. He generates 90 to 95% of the musical ideas, and it's been that way for as long as the band's been together. But something that's important to note about Lille, and in regards to the compositional process, is I think he's very keen, even though he is the centric figure compositionally, in incorporating ideas that all of us, other members of the band, are bringing to the table. I mean, Jacob has riffs that made it on the album. I have riffs that made it on the album. Lil and I actually co-wrote one of the upcoming releases when the whole album comes out, which was a huge bonding experience for us to cultivate this kind of new sound, or new chapter, if you will, in the sound of the band. And of course, Josh and Lille work tirelessly on vocal patterns, the lyrics. So it's definitely a collective compositional process. But I would say the stems, the actual musical ideas, 90 to 95% are coming from Lille, as they should. He's really the addict. He's the central figure. And, from his position on the drums, really conducts the band night to night when we go live, how to deal with the metric shifts and kind of the density that some of the parts of Defeated Sanity demand of all of us,
Yeah, very good.
Let's talk about Accelerating the Rot. That was one I was listening to today, and I was pleasantly surprised at the end. It was earlier this week. I just watching Taxi Driver with my son because he had to do it. He had to write a paper on there, and then I hear
what a progressive world we live in.
I know, and I heard that little clip at the end, and I was like, oh, that's awesome.
Travis. Yeah. Well, I mean, that kind of stems again from the intention for the new album to be more brutal centric, and that's such a huge part of like the brutal death metal sub aesthetic within extreme metal, and even just aggressive music in general, right? You hear this in hardcore, you hear it in gangster rap, just the sample quality, and of course, those kinds of movies. Sorry about the sirens.
Oh, that's okay.
Brooklyn, New York, so it's just comes with the territory. But there's kind of a synonymous relationship between the aesthetic of death metal and those kinds of movies. I myself am a big horror thriller advocate, as is everybody else in the band, and we really wanted to make sure that to kind of sell this notion that we were going back to brutality being at the focus, incorporating that creative element as well, which personally I always love on albums. Like I think about Mortician, I think about bands like Orgasm, who have great samples, Malignancy, and it always just breathes a different life into the musical experience, and more just to elaborate on the subject matter too, which is kind of gets lost in death metal a lot, I think, because the vocals and the guttural style, you're not really getting the lyrics directly, so to insinuate that stuff with samples is always a good move, I think.
What amazed me about Accelerating the Rot was the drum fills, massive drum fills.
Man,
can you talk? Man. Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about those? I mean, obviously you're not the drummer, but the drum fills and the complexity behind fitting those fills into that song.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is, and this kind of goes back to kind of where the music compositionally stems from too, because even though Lille is the focal composer, he really is the main driving force compositionally. In a practical sense and in a performance sense, his role is on the drums. And I think, Lille and I both mutually, as everybody in the band does to a degree, but especially Lille and I, we both share a lot of love for like fusion and progressive music and drum elements that come from outside of death metal, And I think the crowning achievement on Lille's end on the drums is his ability to fit, like you're saying, that kind of vocabulary on the drums in that short amount of time.
Yes. And
execute it flawlessly. And the thing I also love about Lille, people people, I think, who are familiar with the band know that, like, metrically, there's a lot of shifts, right? Like, even in Accelerating the Rock, there's a lot of different rhythmical environments, you know. And Lille finds a way to really conduct those changes with a lot of those fills, too. So there's a technical intention to deliver the fastest, sickest fill possible in, like, the true, you know, death metal style. But the way he accents and orchestrates on the drums also kind of dictates how, you know, you want to feel those riffs on the guitar or the bass or even with the vocal patterns. So he's really, you know, killing it from two different perspectives, really. You know, it's insane. And, you know, Lille, in an age when so many drummers do a lot of editing and a lot of artificial stuff in the studio, I mean, I experienced it firsthand being there with him. He tracked all the drums in about 2 days, you know, raw takes. And maybe there was like a snare hit or a little cymbal hit or a part of the fill that he wanted from another take. But most of what you hear on the album is pretty much raw. So, I mean, it doesn't get more brutal than that to me.
It does not.
Well, can you talk a little bit about the other dynamics with you and the band, as far as, you know, you got Jacob on bass and Josh on vocals. How does the band fit together?
Well, you know, the thing about it is there's this undertone in Defeated because of how the drums relate to the riffs. You know, we're also a trio, basically, when it comes to the actual music, right?
Yeah.
Just one guitar, bass, and drums. So, you know, that coupled with the fact that everyone, or really the vocals, the strings, being Jacob and myself, and Lille, are kind of operating independent of each other. There's this kind of every man for himself mentality, jokingly, you know, where you really have to stand your ground and know your role in whatever the riffs you're playing. You know, you have to have a firm understanding of what you're supposed to do. But at the same time, those three guys are so on top of their shit, especially live, you know, where we don't have click tracks, we don't have anything artificial going. It's very trench. And the confidence that those guys bring to their delivery, their knowledge of what their parts are, make it really a lot easier to function even with where I'm at on the guitar. You know, everyone is at the highest level they need to be to deliver the shit. You know what I mean? And that takes a lot of dedication and work, which we all share, and really passion for what we're trying to do, you know, and many hours of practice.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, talk a little bit more about the challenges, you know, of a trio playing extreme death metal. We see so many other extreme death metal bands that are, you know, five deep or what have you, but there's a lot there's a lot of sound coming out of three guys. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a lot of things. You know, the tradition of, I don't know, with, you know, Eric and Jeff, like, you guys are, I would assume, into or familiar with, like, the heavy metal lineage, right?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, yeah.
You know, starting really obviously with Sabbath, but then, you know, the prime cultivation of metal as a sound, you're looking at bands like Maiden, Priest, Merciful Fate, and then obviously into the thrash movement, Metallica, Slayer, early death metal, Death, more, you know, Morbid Angel, Suffocation. All these are two guitar bands, right?
Exactly.
And the challenge, therefore, is to with Defeated, because those are still big references for everybody in the band. You know, we all have mutual love for different collections of these seminal, you know, bands from these seminal periods. So we all have those references, but now how do we accomplish that in the context of being a trio? And part of that has to do with, you know, first and foremost, I look at Jacob. Jacob plays lead bass in a way that you don't see a lot of metal bass players play. He reminds me of, like, really Steve Harris, and he's a big Iron Maiden fan, and I always think about Steve Harris when I think about Jacob, the way he moves certain lines up the octave, the way him and I will replicate harmony parts that might have been two guitars on the album live with just one guitar on the bass. You know, he orchestrates so well. He has such incredible rhythmic precision. He has such a great sound, and that quality, first and foremost, gives me an opportunity to kind of think about how the guitar is supposed to fit sonically, tonally, in the context of the trio differently, because I'm really getting the attack in the music from the bass. And that's why, you know, we obviously scoop the shit out of the mids. You know, it's not really something you hear in a lot of contemporary extreme metal production. It's kind of out of style, I guess. But for us, that sound is so embedded in why we love, the death metal that we love, Monstrosity, Suffocation, Gorguts, early Gorguts at least, Cannibal Corpse and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's really where the texture of the music comes from. That's where the sinister, evil, bleeding sound of real death metal is coming from. It's coming from, really scooping those mids, a high output from the one guitar. But I couldn't really accomplish getting away with that if I didn't have Jacob's punchiness. And then, of course, going back to what Lilla's doing on the drums, he's filling up so much sonic space with these contrapuntal ideas. It's like an orchestra, even just within the three of us. And then, the conduit between that and the audience becomes Josh and his delivery of the vocals, who is, again, very rhythmically accurate, has a big full sound, doesn't cuff the mic. I can hear Josh on stage when we sound check, even if his monitor's not on.
Oh, wow.
Because he has so much power in his delivery. So I think it's just this kind of next man up mentality. Like, I'm a big hockey guy, right? And I think about it almost like that, where you have to just take a little more of a weight on your shoulders because everyone has to cover the deficit of not having that second guitar, which is a huge part of the tradition of heavy metal, And of course, on the album, it's stereo. I've recorded 2 guitar tracks. So the challenge becomes, how can we replicate that to the best of our ability in a live situation?
Well said. Well, can you talk a little bit about where it came from before Defeated Sanity?
Yeah. So Defeated Sanity was actually the first death metal band I ever heard. So I grew up playing like straight ahead jazz and classical music, went to music conservatories and did all that nerd shit, Yeah. And I was really late to the party with death metal. Like, I didn't get into it until I was like in my mid to late 20s. But I basically heard Defeated Sanity from a mentor, great friend of mine, this amazing guitar player named Ben Monder. He was on David Bowie's last record. He's been on many great jazz albums. Just amazing guy, great guitar player, loves brutal death metal, right? So he put me on to Defeated and a handful of the more contemporary extreme bands. And then that kind of created this love and affinity for the music. And I started going back and then getting into Morbid Angel and Death and King Diamond, and Cynic and Forbidden and Maiden and just fell head over heels in love with it and started to kind of try to transition my relationship with the guitar away from playing jazz and into playing extreme death metal. So the pandemic really helped with that because I had mad time, as we all did, to fuck around and find out. So I put the time in and then came back here to New York and had some great people in my corner. One of the greatest drummers alive, John Longstreth. Shout out to John. Played a lot with him here in New York, and he was a huge influence on just teaching me how to play extreme music, especially him being one of the most extreme drummers. If anyone who's listening isn't familiar, bands like Origin, Hate Eternal, Gorguts. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's I would highly recommend. I mean, John's, as far as extreme drumming, it doesn't get more extreme than him. But long story short, Lilla and I got to know each other just, through the internet, and I was enamored by his music. I could hear the jazz influence. I could hear the progressive stuff coming from the jazz thing. So he kind of kept an eye on me doing some other kind of smaller projects, subbing with some bands, touring and stuff. And then there came a period of time when their long-standing guitar player, Christian Kuhn, he left the band in 2019. And they had some filling guys, but no one that really fit all the qualities I think that they were looking for in a permanent member. And basically this opportunity came around for this little run around Reykjavik Death Fest in Iceland. Right? Mm-hmm. So they were going to headline this festival, which actually was more of a black metal festival, which is very interesting. But and then we had 2 other shows around it, one in Berlin and one in London. And that was basically my audition to join the band. I had like about a little under 2 months to learn the set. I flew over there and we did it. And then after that, they asked me if I wanted to be a full-time member, and it was like a dream come true. Obviously, I love Defeated Sanity, so
fantastic.
It's pretty obscene.
Yeah. Well, the band, speaking of that, the band has an extensive European tour scheduled for 2025. What can your fans expect from the schematics of this highly anticipated tour?
Well, it's the first time the band has been back in Europe doing a full-on headlining tour since I think 2017, 2018. It's been almost 6-7 years, and it's something that as soon as I was in the fold a couple of years ago was always on the table. It was like, okay, when are we going to get back to Europe and headline? But for whatever reason, the last couple of years we did a lot of stuff in the States, played a bunch, recently this past summer in Asia and South Africa, Turkey, but Europe was always really a place that we wanted to return to full on, and especially in conjunction with premiering the album, we thought starting in Europe would be a good way to kind of kill two birds with one stone. I love animals, by the way. Love them. But anyways, it's going to be a great opportunity for us to play the album, in full, as well as a couple old standby classics from the older periods of the band. But really the focus as far as the live set's going to be the new music. And we have a great, great cast of friends and just brutal death metal royalty, some of them coming out with us, specifically to Violently Vomit, which really is Discords, Diego Sanchez, and a group of great musicians he has coming out and playing all the music of Discords, which is his music, a lot of it. Mm-hmm. And that was such a seminal influence on Defeated Sanity going brutal the way they did, and really putting that style of Defeated Sanity, which is what the band was most known for, on the map. That wouldn't have occurred without Diego and Discord. So to have those guys coming out with us, they haven't done a tour of that magnitude in some time too. So I think for the people in Europe that love this kind of music, they're going to get top tier extreme metal.
Oh, fantastic.
When you go on tour, how many guitars do you take with you?
I bring two. Okay. I bring two. I have two Jackson soloists. Jackson guitars are, for me, the gold standard, the best for death metal. And both are crackle finish because, I love that like late 80s metal aesthetic. It's kind of coming back a little bit, but for me, I like having the crackle finishes, keeping it really full stick. And they're both modded out with more advanced pickups, EMG 81 actives, and just really, I gutted everything and put, the kind of hardware in the guitars and pickups that can withstand the expensive touring. They take a beating. Nice. Jacob and I got hooked up with this great company, Anki, that make these gun cases for your guitars. So with us flying all over the place and going through airports and, anyone that's familiar with touring knows how it is in the airport. Yeah. You know what I mean? And what they do to your shit. So, I just bring those two, throw them in the Yankee, and rock and roll. I love them to death.
Fantastic.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, with album sales in the music industry being what it is, talk to us a little bit more about the band's merchandise platform and online store.
So, with this album, we signed All the Seasons of Mist, which is a label based out of Europe, or originally is from Europe. They have a U.S. Kind of affiliate office, too, who we've been working with directly on this release because 3 of the 4 of us actually live in the United States. But they were great in setting up a bunch of different options, through Bandcamp, as well as their own website, as well as, you see it on Spotify, Amazon,
exactly.
All the different platforms that exist now. But Season is doing a really good job. I think for us coming from the underground, and coming from a DIY mentality to be in a situation with a label that's really taking that shit seriously is big for us. And it's great for the fans too. You know what I mean? I'm a fan first, and I like having easy access to the merchandise I want, and Season of Mist make it really easy. We put a lot of thought into the album cover, went with John Zig, who's, the greatest to ever do brutal death metal album covers, and he has some great designs that we use for stuff. So, fans of the shit, please go check that out, scoop some stuff, support the band, support the scene, keep it sick,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, this won't release in time, but I read you guys have a Bandcamp listening party coming up November 7th. Can you tell me a little bit about how that's going to work?
Yeah, it's coming up this coming Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's a great thing that we're doing with Bandcamp, where it's kind of like a premiering of the album. People can come, join the chat room. We'll all be there hanging out and talking shit, but just streaming the album front to back to kind of get people that are already on the hook, or maybe people that are still curious about what it is that we're doing with this album, to kind of get the full experience. In the same way it is, this is a little dated now because of streaming, but it's like going to the movie theater, and seeing a movie before it's released, which again used to be a way bigger deal. I'm old enough to remember when that was the shit.
Yeah.
Like when you knew the movie was going to be in the theater, you saw the trailer and you couldn't just throw it up on your laptop or rip it off the internet. It was like, okay, this is going to be an event, and if I really love the shit, I'm going to go buy the DVD afterwards or whatever. So I kind of equate it to that. And, I know it's just it's a good opportunity to just kind of gauge how people are feeling about the music. So far it's been a pretty positive response. But this is a chance for the fans and anybody who's interested to get the full experience before they can have it in their hands.
Oh, yeah, very cool. Extreme death metal is a thriving scene over in Europe, and can you compare and contrast what the fandom is like for the extreme death metal over in Europe opposed to that what you have here in the States?
Well, I think it's interesting. Europe, as far as just extreme metal or just heavy metal in general, it's embedded within the culture, like they've absorbed it in a completely different way that it is in the United States. Like I think about bands like Halloween, even some of these power metal bands and Lacuna Coil and bands like this that really exist as a result of how it's embedded within the culture in Europe. Now, granted, brutal death metal is an American style. There have been great European bands that have replicated it, obviously Defeated Sanity being one of them, being a German band. But ultimately, I think death metal is an American kind of it's the result of the American metal scene, So when you go to Europe and play it, the people that are over there that love it froth for it, and you have these big festivals like Brutal Assault. Bakken even has brutal bands. I've seen Extreme, stuff like this. In the States, it's less embedded in the culture and has a more of an underground aesthetic, but that also brings out a different kind of fan. The tours that we've done recently in the States have been especially eye-opening because there's a whole new generation of like kids in the States who are really crusty. Maybe it's the political climate, maybe it's just the climate of what's going on in the world these days, but they're young, they're pissed, they're open-minded, and they're really taking to the shit, My experience in Europe was similar, and I'm hoping that it's like that, going into this next tour. But I also know that just culturally, the relationship to extreme metal in Europe has a different quality. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of old Defeated Sanity fans who have been with the band since, the late 90s, early 2000s. But, hoping to see the kids come out in the same way in Europe they do in the States, because it's really refreshing for someone even at my age, to look down and see people that are like 10 years younger than me. It's fucking sick.
That is cool.
It means the music, that the music is going to have a home and a place and meaning beyond when we're all, too old and senile to play it.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
It's good shit.
Well, I hate to ask about influences because I hate that question.
No.
But two of my favorite metal bands of all time are Celtic Frost and Venom and Venom Inc. with Demolition with Demolition Man on vocals with Venom and Venom Inc. For you was and for the rest of the band, was Celtic Frost and Venom influential in the creative process for the band?
I have to say not as much. I have to say not as much. Those are not necessarily bands within the Defeated camp that come to mind immediately. I think, though, the thing that I always loved about Venom personally is this. To me, it was like if Motorhead and Merciful Fate had a baby.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
With Venom, because with Venom, you have the English kind of. I mean, I know that Motorhead are pseudo contemporary in a way, but Lemmy had a couple of years on those guys, and this kind of like almost punk speed edge that you get with Venom, but then incorporated with the aesthetic and thematic kind of perspective of the Merciful Fate Satanist thing. Defeated Sanity has never been a Satanist band per se. That's never been a prerogative. I mean, we love the Satanist stuff. I love Deicide, and Vital Remains and Merciful Fate and early Celtic Frost, early Venom, but I think maybe the spirit of it, the speed factor, I mean, I think Venom is one of the first bands that really were playing recklessly fast, like faster than they might have should have been playing,
exactly,
or what they were comfortable playing.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the edge. That's the edge. And in that way, I think you can equate it, especially to Lilla's drum performance on the new album, because he's definitely pushing his physical limits to the brink. I mean, we all are. Like the speed of the album, it's the fastest defeated album to date. And in that sense, you could relate it to Venom, because who was faster than Venom in 1980? They're pretty fucking fast.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe Motorhead. Maybe they're the only other band that were doing it like that. But that's my thought on Venom. I'd say.
And the thing about Venom and Celtic Frost was back when in their heyday, and I was a junior high student at that time.
Tough.
I was scared shitless of those bands.
Hell yeah.
They were scary bands, and it's amazing as you get older how it's pretty musical and not really that scary after you grow up.
And some of the coolest guys.
You know what it is? I bet the Venom guys are amazing. Man. I bet they're amazing. All these, just the seniority in the scene. I mean, we've all been fortunate, but I've definitely been fortunate to rub shoulders with some of the older statesmen of even our subgenre. With the death metal thing, and dude, they're just the ones that have survived, the ones that have made it this far, who are still doing it. They really carry the torch. They a lot of lessons to be learned from guys like that, even if they're just talking about bullshit, you know what I mean? Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Having such a good time with you guys.
We're glad you are. We have one last question for you, then we'll leave you alone for the evening. Sound good?
Yeah, for sure.
So once again, this falls into the influences tag. Yeah. I hate using it, but I'm going to do it anyway. So you've talked about your career in jazz as well as extreme death metal, but can you talk a little bit more about influences outside of those two pockets? I mean, was there anything else that kind of drove you as far as genre of music besides those two genres?
I mean, to me, the bottom line, personally, and this is, again, a mutual love that I know we all in the band share to some degree, especially Lila and I, but for me, the bottom line was always Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
Like, Hendrix is still, I listen to as much Hendrix. I mean, that was the first guitar-centric music I heard that as soon as I heard it, I was like, this is what I need to do with my life. It wasn't a choice. It was just the conviction. And it's like kind of like you were saying with the Venom thing, right? Where you get older and you're like, it's not as crazy as it sounds. With Hendrix, I almost have the opposite reaction. Where now, even having all the experiences I've had playing the guitar professionally and, touring the world and living it, it's like I go back and I listen to the things that Hendrix was doing, just the quality of sound, the inventiveness, the imagination, what he was doing with, very primitive, tools as far as distortion and how to modify guitar sounds, just live feedback, the vibrato, the expression, the songwriting, the ferocity. I mean, it checks every box to me of what the guitar is all about, So definitely Hendrix, a lot of classical music. I studied classical music seriously in college. So did Lila, Jacob a little bit too. Josh is very familiar with that. So we listen to a lot of classical music, As far as like energy, I love 90s gangster rap, and kind of the subsidiaries of that. And again, I think, you can draw so many parallels from when a lot of these kind of what we consider nowadays extreme sounds kind of that late 80s, early 90s explosion in music where aggression was kind of at the center of everything. You see it in gangster rap, you see it in punk and early hardcore, you see it in death metal and thrash metal, you see it in even contemporary popular rock and roll music with what was going on in Seattle. And it's all these different aesthetics trying to kind of get to the same point on the spectrum, just from different places, right? If the circle's in the middle, they're all coming from different parts of the external line of the circle. But at the heart of all of it is the aggression. And I even hear that in Hendrix's music. I even hear that in Beethoven or Bach, you know what I mean? There's a spirit to it, a restlessness to it. And that, to me, is as much as people kind of hear the technical things in Defeated Sanity, it's important to note that at the end of the day, the four of us, I think, prioritize the spirit of the music over any of that. And that's what you can kind of draw parallels to with all of these artists that have inspired me, certainly, and everybody else in the band.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well,
Cool.
we're out of our allotted time for the evening. Is there anything that we left off tonight that you would like to plug or promote?
No. Hey, Eric, Jeff, thanks for having me. You know, for anybody listening, please, if you are looking for the most brutal, extreme, sick, fast thing you've ever heard in your life, check out the new album. And we're going to be in Europe in the winter. We're working on Latin America in the spring, going back over to Europe in the summer, and then hopefully in the United States in the fall. So there's a lot of stuff on the horizon as far as promoting the album live. And the last thing I'll say for the listeners, and even Eric and Jeff, if you guys ever get the opportunity, you know, at the end of the day, we are a live band. Like that's where the music belongs. You know, no backing tracks, no click tracks, nothing. It's just trench, as we say. You know,
well,
and I think that cultivates. Yeah, that's the shit. That's what makes Venom sick, right?
Absolutely.
It's a spiritual thing, man. It's like you hear the fight in it, and as much as we poured that energy into the album, I don't think you can get the full picture unless you come and experience it live, full volume. You know, blasting in your face. So, come out and check us out in the next couple of years. And I can't thank you guys enough for having us and giving us a chance to talk about the album.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is how things are going to work out. Once Jeff, the editing ninja over here, gets all of our boogers cleaned up, it'll sound like $1 million. Sound good?
Hey, that's total killer, man. I really appreciate you guys having me and by proxy the band on. You know, it's nice to talk to anybody about this shit, you know?
No, absolutely. When it's all ready to go, I will send it to your publicist, and I can also text you the attachment of the interview, and please share it wherever you can. Does that sound good?
Yes. Absolutely. We'll throw it up on all of our various socials and do all that. Thank you so much, guys.
Vaughn, thank you so much. You were fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I'll let you guys get to it. Hey Eric, Jeff, thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for calling in. We appreciate it.
Fuck yeah.
Take
Cheers,
care.
boys.
All right, thanks.
All right.
Everybody pulls the plug and says their last goodbyes. Move to the sunshine, fight the grip of nights. If they ever take from you, then you plug out both their eyes. They roll the dice. Take your chances.
Welcome to the night. You think you know Night Demon? Then the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast is for you. Step into the darkness as we peel back the curtain to give you an unprecedented, all-access look into the mind and the heart of the demon. We're talking band history, song analysis, studio anecdotes, stories from the road. It's everything a diehard Night Demon fan could want and more. This is the only place to learn the inside scoop, the deep dive trivia, the untold tales from the band members themselves and those closest to the Night Demon story. Need more? The Sacred Night Demon Crypt will be pried open to reveal demo recordings that have never before seen the light of day, all with in-depth commentary by the band and the people who were there for the writing and recording process. This is a gold mine, a treasure trove of all things Night Demon. Head over to nightdemon.net or wherever you listen to podcasts.